And in this pandemic, this election coverage looks quite different. Rather than being in a convention room watching the returns with candidates, we're all on Zoom. And we want to thank you for watching us on FNX, First Nations Experience, Arizona PBS, and hello to our viewers in Canada watching on APTN, the Aboriginal People's Television Network. And of course, hello to everyone tuned in on one of the social media platforms. We welcome each one of you to our election night coverage. This first hour, me and my colleague, Jordan Bennett-Begay, will cover the live broadcast. Let's go now to Jordan.
Yate, I'm coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau, a few blocks from the White House and the Black Lives Matter Plaza. Tonight, we are following not only the race for the President of the United States, we are also following 111 Native candidates across the country. 66 of the candidates are women and 45 are men.
That's right, Jordan, and there's an even split between those running for office for the first time and those seeking re-election. And tonight we'll be bringing you stories about some of those candidates and what made them run and how much experience do they have and what sort of future do they envision for Indian country. And in our second hour, we're going to turn it over to Elia Chavez and Mark Trehant. But for now, let's go back to Jordan.
Here are some things to know about our coverage. You can watch us and follow our stories on social media and at IndianCountryToday.com. If you post or share any of our stories, use the hashtag NativeVote20. Also, we have Paula Jordan. She is the Indigenous Affairs reporter for the Texas Observer, and she will be bringing us the latest of social media, what's happening in Indian country, and all the conversations are happening online right now.
That's right, Jordan. And at this point in time, the results are so far trickling in here. And you know, it's not unkind that there are a few states where the polls are still open or have just closed, such as in California, Oregon, Washington, parts of Idaho, Alaska, and Hawaii. And remember, the final vote count usually takes place, again, like I said, the day after the election, as states continue to count mail-in ballots. So keep that in mind as we watch the election results come in tonight.
No, not yet, not yet. We're,
Jordan, you're live here.
Oh. Hi, Yate. Teleprompter. Okay. Hey. Call me, help me.
Jordan, you're live. The prompt or wherever it's at.
Hi, so across the country, Native people have supported and advocated for both presidential campaigns. Correspondent Karina Dominguez spoke to some Natives who support President Donald Trump.
On Zoom, and there's a lot of technical issues here.
Last month, President Donald Trump announced a list of promises to tribal nations, and he launched a Natives for Trump coalition.
Yeah, go Trump! Yeah, go Trump! Yeah, go Trump! All of you all! Yeah, go Trump! Yeah, go Trump!
We're here to say that Native Americans, we want our piece of the American dream, and that we want opportunity, we want jobs, we want to see our next generation do better than the last. And I think the best way that we honor our ancestors is by taking advantage of opportunities today that they did not have, but rejecting the far radical left's agenda for these big government socialist style policies that have left our people in poverty and what I believe in despair.
Donald Trump Jr. spoke at the Natives for Trump rally in northern Arizona.
Trump wants to do the opposite. He wants to bring our troops home and build up our military here. So if we need to use it, we are ready.
Come online as soon as you can, please.
Trump! 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 Trump!
I can't hear her.
Hopi Trump supporter Robin Brigman was excited about the outreach.
Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this because I've been talking to different committees, because I'm on different committees in
Here we
Sedona,
go.
and we have Native people come in, and I wanted to get something Native Americans for Trump because I'm Hopi, and Hopi's very small. Hello, how are you? But I wanted to get the word out over there and get
Vice President Mike Pence hosted a rally in Flagstaff this weekend, and not only were tribal leaders campaigning hard for President Trump, but so was Brigman. She created her own flyers to hand out to Native Trump supporters. Many of the topics she highlighted were from the president's Tribal Nations Promise, which he calls putting America's first peoples first. The plan calls for respecting tribal sovereignty, economic development, improving education, and delivering better health care. But for supporters like Jermaine Burnside, it's the law and order that Trump preaches that won his vote.
I know it's kind of a controversy to say that you're Native American and then also say that you are pro-America, especially with the history of this country with the Native American people. I know that some people have a hard time understanding that. But for me, I think there can be a happy medium of the two where you can acknowledge the history and respect that, and then also want what's best for, you know, everybody as a whole.
He is Navajo and an aerospace engineering student who is vocal about his support for Trump on his YouTube channel.
But the point is just to show that Native Americans can have various political beliefs and are not just one monolithic thing. But I will say Native Americans tend to heavily vote Democrat.
The Native vote drew more bipartisan attention as the election approached. A week before Joe Biden and Kamala Harris introduced their Tribal Nations plan, President Trump had signed 2 bills into law that address issues surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous people.
How much time?
In Phoenix, Karina Dominguez for Indian Country Today.
We are now joined by one candidate, Lynette Grable, a Northern Arapaho and Hunkpapa Lakota who ran for the U.S. House of Representatives in Wyoming. Grable unsuccessfully ran against Republican incumbent Liz Cheney. And now Grable is talking to us from the Wind River Reservation with some family and friends. Hi, Lynette. How are you feeling this evening?
I felt good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. So it's quite a fight you pit against, Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney, the former vice president. How do you overcome a fight like the name Cheney?
Well, you know what? I think that in any race for any office, for either state or federal, for Indigenous people, it's imperative that we put our best efforts forward because we need to be represented in Washington, D.C. So whether you feel like you're up against somebody who is a powerhouse like Liz Cheney, it's important that we still have the guts and courage to put ourselves out there and make our voices be heard and make sure that our youth are able to see representatives and people who are running for office who looks and is from their community, the reservation. So, I have all sense of pride and honor to have ran this race, and I would do it all over again.
And that's quite true. I mean, even though, it was unsuccessful, you did make history, right? You were the first Native person to run for Congress in Wyoming, and that's quite an honor.
Why are you stating that it's unsuccessful? There's still people in line to vote in 4 counties right now.
Yes, and then the Associated Press was the one who called it. So a lot of our races are, we're referring to the Associated Press, and they're one who called it right now, but we'll still be keeping the results in. Who can you tell us who a little bit is there with you now? Are you having some watch parties, a watch party there at home with you?
Yes, absolutely. I have my family here with me. We are definitely having a watch party. We only 1% of the numbers that have come in at this point. And like I stated, there's about 4 counties where people are still in line to vote. So at the very least, I want to make sure that the numbers all come in before any race is called. And everybody had their right to exercise their right to vote and make sure their voices are heard. So I'm glad to be here with family who are supportive. My tribe's affiliation has also been very supportive, and that to me also brings me a lot of honor.
No, it's definitely right. And like you said, it's great to see a lot of Native candidates running, including yourself. There are 14 Native candidates running for Congress this year. And I mean, you were talking to a little bit about the voters who are still standing in line. What are you hearing from them, or what are you reading online?
I just have people in different counties that are reporting to me that they're still in line. That's the only thing I know. I don't know much else, but I know that from what I gather from just news outlets across the state, it's have been record-breaking numbers in voting this year, both in early voting and then also the turnout for each precinct. So I'll be anxious to see what those numbers look like as far as new voters for the state of Wyoming.
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a different election this year, and I'm sure you experienced that with your campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about how you had to navigate like the current landscape?
Yeah, I think for any candidate, it's been pretty difficult to navigate a campaign during a pandemic and also be aware and be safe during COVID. The Wind River Reservation takes up about 50% of COVID deaths in the state of Wyoming. And so it's something that was a priority for myself and my campaign to ensure that not only protect myself, but we protect others as we campaign through this pandemic. But I did everything fast, and, I connected with a lot of people throughout the state and even the nation. So, you know what? Under the circumstances, I'm glad that I was still able to connect with voters, new voters. A lot of Republican voters have also supported my campaign. And you know what? There's nothing that makes me prouder than to cross party lines and get the vote.
Oh, wow. And is there one or two stories from voters that stood out to you this past in this campaign?
Yeah, I had a lot of voters. Actually, these were people who wrote me letters, people who posted on my social media campaign page that expectation from somebody who actually lives in the state. But also, public lands is a big one here. I think no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, a lot of people had a lot of passion for our public lands and protecting our lands and our water and things of that nature. And so I think I was able to resonate with a lot of voters in regards to advocating for those issues.
Oh, definitely. And then also there at the Wind River Reservation, I remember reporting on the COVID impact there. Can you tell us and viewers like what it's like there in your home?
Yeah, like I said, during this campaign, we had to, ensure that we were safe, that we were being safe with the community. I canceled a lot of in-person events due to COVID. Unfortunately, right now, we are on the rise of COVID cases in the state of Wyoming, and especially for the Wind River Reservation. And so, I had to take that in consideration. The death toll for Wyoming, 50% of the death toll is Native Americans. And so those are things that we had to consider. I believe anybody who is elected for office in 2021 that moves forward, the first agenda on the American agenda is going to be COVID-19 relief. So hopefully honest and true representatives are elected tonight and able to move forward to think about the people across the nation who absolutely needs COVID-19 relief, not only just for citizens, but also for small businesses. I think for COVID-19 relief packages that we've seen in the past, our small businesses, our mom and pop businesses kind of were left in the shadows, so to speak. And I would like to see more COVID-19 actually affect the people who do the hard work in the small business realm support it. I think that's going to be a big one coming in 2021.
Are there any other issues that you were advocating for? I mean, I know a lot of people probably don't know. Can you let them know what you were advocating for during your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, I spoke about COVID-19 relief, but I made sure that my campaign was reflecting on who I was. I wasn't trying to be anything that I'm not doing. That I'm not. So for instance, I've been in philanthropy work for 13 years. I did a lot of work for serving, homelessness, single mothers, veterans. And so these are things that I'm passionate about. These are things that I'm going to continue to do probably for the rest of my life. And when we talk about extreme poverty, we always have to talk about Indian country.
Thank you. Lynette.
The 5 counties, the 5 poorest counties, important that we have representation.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, keep going. Oh, sorry, I kind of cut out there. I think we're having we're having some little bit of technical difficulties, but this is Indian country. Any last words that you would want to say right now?
Yeah, really quickly, I just want to thank everybody across the nation that has supported my campaign. Every state has contributed to my campaign except for 2 states in the U.S. I just want to say that I ran this race for all Indigenous people, for all the tribes across the nation. This time we had a handful of candidates running for House and Senate, but in the future, I hope to see hundreds and thousands of candidates running for these seats. So, my inspiration is Indian country and changing the lives that we see on the reservation, and I know that we will get there one day. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Lynette. Thank you so much. Back to you, Patty.
Well, for months now, the National Congress of American Indians worked to register as many natives as they could. She's the Vice President of External Affairs with NCAI. Hi, Alicia. Thanks for joining us. Okay, I'm not being able to hear Alicia right now. Let me just ask you a question. Hopefully you can hear me. This work that you're doing is all part of the civic engagement team with NCAI. Tell us about some of the obstacles Native Americans face when it comes to voting.
We're going to have to keep moving. We're going to have to keep going. Can you stretch?
Okay, we're having technical issues, and again, we're probably not the only Native organization or news organization that is coming to you on Zoom.
Faintly.
And so we are having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we got it fixed now. Alicia, can you hear me? Can you hear me now, Alicia Maddox?
Can Jordan take this part over?
Yes, I can hear you. I faintly heard Patty, and I know she asked if I could hear her, but I can hear her just very faintly.
Okay, we're going to do this 3-party. So let me ask the question, and I think, Alicia, you can probably hear.
Perfect.
I
can hear you now.
Oh, fantastic. So what are some of the obstacles that Native Americans face when it comes to voting?
Sure, thank you for asking. So along with the Native American Voting Rights Coalition, NCAI, and several of our other partners learned a lot in the obstacles at Every Turn report this past year. And the report was officially released in May, but portions of the report were released last year. And that's what really kicked off the Native Vote campaign for NCAI. And essentially, a lot of those barriers included the transportation issues, income issues, issues with accessing ballot boxes in polling places, not having addresses that are traditional for, IDs in particular states. And some of those tactics have been used against us and created voter suppression. And so some of those things were what we used to start the baseline of our Native Vote campaign. We really wanted to create informed and educated voters because Native people really truly do have a powerful voice, and we really wanted to put that power back into the hands of Native people. So we did that alongside ICT at the Frank Lemire Presidential Forum in Iowa. That was one of the most powerful events that we had in 2019, and it really, really spearheaded all of the efforts that led into 2020. And, 2020 is one of the biggest years for civic engagement for Indian country, starting with the census. It was, census kicked off in Indian country, starting with Alaska Natives. And from there, we really just tried to create a snowball of efforts, and we leveraged our census coordinators to really try to plant that seed for voter engagement, and COVID deeply impacted a lot of those outreach efforts. But as soon as we could get back out there, we hosted a Native Vote Kickoff rally in May, and we invited all of our partners to talk about some of their community issues that they were hearing too. We have more than 1,200 Native Vote coordinators across the country, and we had a lot of them speak with us to talk about issues in Nevada and Arizona, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Oklahoma, and in the Dakotas. And so we really tried to just create an ecosystem this time around so that we were sure that we were dispersing resources, toolkits, information, funding, and really try to make sure that we were unifying as Indian country to make sure that every Native vote counts.
Alicia Maddox, thank you for joining us. Again, Alicia Maddox with the National Congress of American Indians. Jordan?
As polls close across the country, we're keeping an eye out on some key states where the Native vote could sway the election. Stick around. We'll be back with more election updates. Yep.
Okay, no. Got a chance. Fort Tom Cole is ready. Becia, thank you so much. You were amazing. Have a great night. Scott, we just need you to unmute real quick. That's cool.
Candidate grabbed some victories this evening. The Associated Press reported that Trump took Alabama, Mississippi, and Oklahoma, while Biden won Massachusetts and his home state, Delaware, and Virginia, which is a former battleground state. And looking like the other updates from the electoral votes, according to the Associated Press, Joe Biden comes in with 131 electoral votes and Donald Trump with 98. And some other races that we're keeping an eye on. In Kansas, there is Ponkawi Victors, and she's running for the Kansas State Legislature. This would be her 6th term. And right now she's in the lead with 63%. And then as well as Stephanie Byers, who is Chickasaw, and she is in the lead with 54% against Cindy Howerton with 45%. And then in Michigan, and the Michigan State Court, we have Catherine Neptune, and she's the last 7 out on the ballot right now. And some other updates we're looking at are in New Mexico, Shannon Pinto. She's running for the New Mexico State Senate, and right now she's in the lead in her race. In South Dakota, we have Perry Poirier, and who is trailing behind Liz May right now, and she's running for the state house. Poirier is running for the state house. And we also have in South Dakota, Red Dawn Foster, who is trailing behind her opponent, who is Jude Shaw. And for those who don't know, a lot of other Native candidates are running. We're keeping track on 111 candidates. 66 are women, Native women, and 45 are men. And 9 have already been elected in their special election, so they're now in their seats. And as well, in this whole election cycle, the 2020 election cycle, there have been a total of 160 presidential candidates as well. And some other races that were called by the AP earlier this evening, Mark Wayne Mullen, who is running in Oklahoma. He is elected to another term. He serves right now in the U.S. House of Representatives for Oklahoma, and he's been there for quite some time right now. And again, the Associated Press, we are looking to their results for our election updates, and we'll be bringing you results to those as those results come in. Patty?
Well, yes, Jordan, more and more Native candidates are running for Congress, and in this last election here, 14 Native candidates running for seats, and again, it's just a really tight race, and of course, many polls have not closed yet or are still, open, so it's too early to call many of these races or even to get an idea of how they are doing, except for a few. The one candidate running for the Senate, as you mentioned, is Paula Jordan, and she is of course, in Idaho, and so those polls are still open there. And the people who are expected to get reelected, and in fact, Representative Sharice Davids in Kansas has a large lead right now, and so she will most likely serve a second term. And then, of course, we're watching the races of Deb Haaland, Tom Cole, Mark Wayne Mullen as well. And in Hawaii, Kai Kahele, who is also hoping for a win there. So we are continuing to follow all of these candidates. There are 318 women running for Congress, and of that, 117 are women of color. So again, you're seeing an increase in women and women of color running for offices. Jordan?
It has been 2 years since Representative Sharice Davids was elected to Congress. Reporter Aaliyah Chavez touched base with her to discuss her biggest accomplishments and how she maintains balance with a demanding schedule.
The former MMA fighter, now known as Congresswoman, Representative Sharice Davids of the Ho-Chunk Nation, says she has prioritized fitness as a way to maintain balance during her first term of Congress.
Hey everybody, Sharice Davids here. Just getting my workout in with my mask on.
Davids was elected in 2018 on the same night as Deb Haaland, a representative from New Mexico. Together, they made history as the first two Native women elected in the Congress's 200-year history. David says being elected together has been a special part of her first term.
I think a lot of people know what it feels like to be the only person in the room that's like them. It's almost never just me. You know, whether we're talking about being on the House floor, whether we're talking about the caucus meetings that we go to, I can always, even when I'm doing something else, know that I can look over and Congresswoman Deb Haaland is right there too.
The duo are part of a historic class of freshman members.
It might sound a little bit cheesy, but it really has been the honor of a lifetime to be able to do this, to be able to serve in the House on behalf of the 3rd District here in Kansas.
As one might imagine, there is a lot to learn going from being a regular citizen to an elected official.
It has been a steep learning curve, for sure.
Despite this, Davids achieved things that weren't easy, including passing a number of bills in the House and even presiding over the House floor.
Pursuant to House Resolution 281, reports the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole.
Last year, Davids introduced...
You know, my mom was a 20-year Army veteran, and I think growing up in a military family, I've had the chance to see just, you know, the ways that we need to honor the promises that we've made to our veterans and service members.
The bill was passed by the House in November 2019 and is currently being heard in the Senate. Other parts of her work include advocating for Indian country, working across the aisle with Republican Representatives Mark Wayne Mullen and Tom Cole, who are also Native.
It's not a partisan thing to support tribal sovereignty, to recognize the relationship between the federal government and tribal governments. And I think it's a really great thing for us to have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats who can demonstrate that to people.
A highlight for Davids has been encouraging people to get to the polls, even sharing the importance of Native voters in this historic election.
Do not underestimate the power of the Native vote, because we can make a huge impact in 2020 and then, of course, in the years going forward.
She's also spent time learning about the Native candidates running for office, not just in Kansas, but across Indian country.
We're seeing this amazing time where we get the chance to support Native candidates all across the country in all levels of government. I actually get a lot of inspiration from people who are running for office now. It's part of some of the stuff that gives me hope.
This goal of electing more Natives, David says, won't be completed overnight.
I think I'm not alone in this when I say that both Congresswoman Haaland and I, of course, we're honored to be the first 2 Native American women to serve, but you know, the work won't be done until we're talking about that 5th and 6th and 7th and 10th Native woman.
In Phoenix, Aaliyah Chavez, Indian Country Today.
Paula joins us now with an update from social media. She's an Indigenous Affairs reporter for the Texas Observer. Paula, what are the big social media trends and conversations that are happening right now? I'm sure people are talking up quite a storm right there.
Yeah, definitely. So once again, everyone is really making sure that everyone for office. So there's been a lot of that. On TikTok in particular, young showing videos of them driving to the polls, including driving on dirt roads here on the Navajo Nation, headed to their local chapter house to cast their ballots. And then just one tweet that I really want to highlight is from Aaron Yazzie. And he said, one generation ago, Native Americans weren't allowed full voting rights. Today, we dance to the polls. And I thought that was such a strong and powerful message, really talking about how Native American folks have been disenfranchised when it comes to voting and how that has impacted voter turnout in Indian country.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean, Aaron, and I guess for those who don't know, Aaron Yazzie is a Navajo mechanical engineer who works for NASA JPL, and he sent 2 of his life's work to Mars, which is really great, right? Are there any like hashtags that are people are continually using? I don't know, TikTok, Twitter.
Yeah, so definitely people are using the ScoVoteDen hashtag as well as the Native Vote hashtag. So those are 2 of the hashtags that I've been following. And then also on TikTok, everyone just tends to put
become the platform for young people to jump to. I think before, Snapchat, I think is right up there because I think originally Facebook and Twitter were the 2 platforms many people gravitated to. I mean, what makes TikTok, maybe Snapchat different this time around?
So definitely in this election, TikTok has a huge platform versus back in 2016 in the last election. I think back then it was called Musical.ly, but now we have TikTok, and it's definitely been a platform for not only Indigenous people in the United States to really come together, but also people who are from Canada and other Indigenous folks from all across the world. I've known that I've seen First Nations folks from Canada being like, yo, like Native folks in America, are you guys doing okay? And being like, hey, you're always welcome to my community. So that has been really awesome to see on TikTok.
Well, and it's funny too, because I know Indian Country Today just created TikTok, and I'm just really impressed with the amount of, content that young people are able to produce. So thank you so much, Paula. Thank you and we'll come back to you later in the broadcast. We'll be. In Zoom, and it's just really, the campaigns have to be get creative right now, and Native candidates. Right back to you, Patty.
All right, Jordan, and we have some updates here on races, and it looks to Associated Press is calling the race in Colorado. Democrats have flipped that, so now they take 1 Senate seat in Colorado. Also, again, the presidential race turns out to be a very tight race, of course, and many states are still too close to call on the East Coast. Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and of course Arizona being a swing state here, now a purple state, which in the past has been a very hot red state. So we'll continue to wait for election results there as well. And we want to also mention that congratulations goes out to Republican Representative Tom Cole, who has won his re-election campaign in Oklahoma, as well as Markwayne Mullin, who also has won his re-election. So Tom Cole will serve a 10th term in Congress representing Oklahoma, and he is Chickasaw, while Markwayne Mullin will serve his 5th term in Congress as well. So congratulations to those 2 candidates, 2 Native Americans. going
Hi,
back
everyone.
into Congress.
Christina Blackcloud here.
Also, Doreen
I
Wanda
am the
Johnson
House
in New
candidate for
Mexico,
Senate,
who won her state House seat race, as well as Georgine Lewis, who is also from New Mexico, and she won her state House seat. So again, we'll have more updates on races as we get into the results. Jordan, back to you.
Or do we go to the Christina Haswood?
You're live. You're live.
Hello, welcome back. So just to give you all an update, again, this is a special election night coverage with Indian Country today. We are following the presidential race right now, as well as a total of 111 Native candidates who are running in this 2020 general election. And when you break those numbers down, there are 66 Native women running in this general election and 45 Native men. And again, about 9 Native candidates already won in their special elections that happened earlier this year. And in total, for the 2020 election cycle, there were 160 total Native candidates. And as of now, we confirm, the Associated Press confirmed that we have the first, we have Mark Raymond from Oklahoma, who won his congressional race. And we are still looking at the other races right now. A lot are flowing in. We have our Indian Country Today's team, who is, been working around the clock and actually has been working, the past 2 years since the 2018 midterm election, which of course has a lot of firsts. And now even in this election, we might have a lot of firsts too. One, for example, is we just had earlier, Lynette Grable, and she is from the Wind River Reservation, and also Wind River Reservation, and she was the first Stephanie Byers, and she could potentially be the first openly transgender person in the state. And then now we're going to be coming in with watch parties right from Iowa, and it's Keely Purcell, and even in this even in this like pandemic, watch parties are happening, and we are trying to, from what we hear, they're socially distanced. People are quarantining and checking each other's temperature. And I don't know if we have Keely on right now, so I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, right? This is Indian Country. I think that just stands to attest that broadband issues are still a thing, even with news organizations. And I think we are trying to get in Keely right now, who is coming in from the Meskwaki settlement in Iowa.
It is on. Oh, it is. Okay. Hey,
and
everybody.
I think
Can you hear me okay?
Hi, is this Keely?
I am here with Christina Blackcloud, who is Meskwaki tribal member, and she is running for Iowa House 72. We just got our first set of numbers in, and we're like this close. But it was only one set of numbers, and it was a district that we didn't really think we were going to get anyway. But oh my God, for being like 20 votes off, that's freaking amazing. So we're super pumped, and I've got Christina here to talk to you. If you have any questions for her, she can answer those.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess like there you guys are having the watch party. Can you tell us like how many people or who's all there and what's going on and describe the excitement and the atmosphere there?
Okay. So we're actually having like a really socially distant watch party. We have one of our local drum groups here, and we have several volunteers that have been with Christina throughout the whole campaign, and they're here. We're in a huge ballroom, but there's probably about 20 people actually hanging out with Christina, family and friends and supporters. But we've had over 100 people come through for our grab and go meals tonight, and that's been really, really exciting. We've still had people shaking Christina's hand and making donations, and they're just really excited and really pumped. One of the things that I loved when I got here early to help set up the tables and do that thing, the ladies that actually own this place were on the phone with their relatives, and they were calling on their own without being prompted. Did you vote? Did you vote? Hey, we need you to vote. Go over there and grab grandma, and go over there and get auntie. And they were making their nieces and nephews get up, get off the couch, and go and vote for Christina Black Cloud. And it's been a really, really exciting evening. We had a lady come and deliver pizzas tonight, and she's from one of the little neighbor towns, and she's like, oh, I'm so excited. She said, I really hope she wins. And so the thing that I like the most and what I'm really enjoying about being here with Christina is that this is not just a Native thing. This is a everybody thing. She is running with people that are non-Native. She has support from the doing tonight.
Really, I mean,
for all of Indian country and for all of Turtle Island, really.
Well, thank you so much, Keely. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of energy there. Thank you so much for joining us.
We were really glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Akihet. It sounds like, well, even through Zoom, you can have a lot of energy and excitement and a socially distanced and safe watch party. So in September, I took a cross-country road trip to Kansas, where I met up with Christina Haswood, the 26-year-old Diné woman who is running for the Kansas State Legislature. She is running unopposed, so she could soon be representing her community that she grew up in, Lawrence, Kansas, which is also encompasses her alma mater, Haskell Indians Nation University.
Most recently in February, I saw Representative Ponkwee Victors introduce her Missing Murdered Indigenous Women's Peoples bill at a press hearing, and that was an amazing moment for me because representation matters to me, and when I see somebody who looks like me doing the work that I hope and dream of doing, that pretty much solidified the confidence for me to run. And so that's kind of how I got involved here, and the seat became open, so this was a perfect opportunity for an Indigenous person to represent Indigenous dense.
Haskell has always had a special place in my heart. My father actually came out here because he was going to play basketball and football, and then my mom eventually came here to Haskell Nations University, and I was about 3 or 4 years old, and this was the time where you can bring your kid to classes. And she would tell the story all the time that I'd have my coloring books and my crayons, and I would go to class with her, and I would copy her, trying to take notes on my little coloring book. I got my associates in science and community health, and it was here that I learned my passion for public health for our peoples and our community.
Haswood also received her bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and her master's degree from the University of Kansas. What catapulted her into policy was an internship in Washington, D.C.
So I went with the congressional director, and she had me tag along with these meetings. I finally got to sit at one of the tables of decision making. And so we would go in and meet with staffers and advocate on American Indian health policies. I'm in the urban area, which was exactly who I am. I'm an urban Indigenous woman. And so when I saw that I could potentially thrive in this area, I came back to the state of Kansas and started to get involved at the local and state level politics, mainly because I heard this quote saying, local level government and politics affects your everyday life.
Haswood is running unopposed in her district and could be one of the few young state legislators in Kansas, a role she is excited to take on.
There's a lot of things I look forward to, and one of the most important parts is building this relationship with my voters and hearing their issues and their priorities. Looking forward to learning about other people's values across the state of Kansas too, and rural Kansas and western Kansas, and seeing how I can help. Other things that I'm looking forward to is being a representation, having another Indigenous woman out there. I think would get more people excited about politics and about voting, how to get active and get involved, and being young too, the youth too, giving some hope for them as well with their issues that are important to them.
From Lawrence, Kansas, Jordan Bennett Begay, Indian Country Today.
Well done, Vince.
How's Victoria Steele's race going, Patty?
Well, actually, we've got some good news for Victoria Steele here, and we're going to go to her in just a second. But first, let me give you some other updates here. Excuse me. Deb Haaland has now won a second term. She defeated her Republican challenger, Michelle Garcia Holmes. And so Deb Haaland will be representing New Mexico in Congress again, once again being one of the first 2 Native women to serve in Congress. And so far, all 4 Native Americans who are running for re-election to the U.S. Congress have won their races. Deb Haaland, Representative Tom Cole, Mark Wayne Mullen, and also Sharice Davids have all won their re-election bids. And so the night is young. We're going to find out if more Native Americans will be sitting alongside them in Congress here. And an update from Arizona as well. We are now reporting that Sally Ann Gonzalez has won her re-election bid, as has Jamasita Peshlikai, and of course Victoria Steele. And so let's go straight to Victoria Steele and congratulate her on her winning a bid for a term in the Arizona State Senate. Welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Really nice to have you here too. And it's a lot different this time than it was back in 2018. We're not in this crowded ballroom with everybody around us and celebrating, but congratulations on your re-election. How are you celebrating there tonight? Who do you have at your watch party?
I have a couple of friends in the next room. They're on other Zooms, and they're just making so much noise. I had to close the door. But yeah, we're doing just fine. It is, I'm getting joking tweets from other people saying, wow, it's close, but we think you're going to pull it out. I have to remind them, I'm running unopposed. You're not looking.
Hey, well, it's all that about that support. Your people there to put you up and tell you can do another term there in the Arizona Senate. So, when you took office this last term, one of the issues that you started tackling right away was the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And in fact, your committee just released the first bit of data on that report. Did anything surprise you in that report?
Well, first of all, I wanted to just mention that the first time that I met you, I think it was the first time I met you, was on election night 2 years ago. And you asked me, what do I want to do? And I said, one of the things that I want to do is find a way to address the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls epidemic, and, bring attention to it and help people to understand that this is such a serious problem. So we did, and we got it passed in the there's the Indigenous Peoples Caucus at the Arizona legislature. So it's members on both the House and the Senate side. And we've got a very powerful, wonderful group of people. And we were able to put together legislation to start a study committee on this issue. And so we actually ended up passing the legislation on this unanimously in both houses, both chambers, rather.
That's an issue that we're going to continue following.
And it was absolutely incredible. So we just completed a nearly year-long study on this. And I will tell you that it was challenging because of COVID.
Well, Senator Steele, we're going to come back to you, and we're going to follow you as you take your second term in the Arizona State Senate. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And, you know, so many Native groups who have been out there trying to get out the Native vote. The National Congress of American Indians is watching the data on the Native vote. And so joining us now is Sierra Watt, and she's a research associate with the Policy Research Center at the National Congress of American Indians. Welcome, and thanks for joining us, Sierra.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, can you tell us about the number of Natives casting their ballots in this election? What kind of turnout do we have this year so far?
Oh, the turnout has been so exciting this year. This election is going to break so many records in recent years. Statewide, we've taken a look at early voting numbers in comparison to how they relate to the 2016 numbers. And interestingly enough, a lot of states with a high number of American Indians and Alaska Natives have had a really large surge in terms of their early voting, both mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, as well as early in-person voting. Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, both of the Dakotas, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, Washington, Wisconsin, all were over 140% of their 2016 early voting numbers. That's just a wild amount to already be in. And of those states, they all were over 50% of their total ballots cast within the 2016 election. Now that's statewide, that's not for just Native surge.
And are you seeing a lot of first-time voters? Are they young people?
A lot of the reporting currently on early voting has shown that it's a lot of voters who we don't always see turning out in high numbers, including young voters, voters of color. Both campaigns tried really hard to bring out less likely voters this year. Our team has also been tracking a lot of close races where the AIA in population is high and where it potentially is larger than the polling difference between candidates. In particular, we've been watching those close electoral college races where it's a little too close to call. The candidates are going back and forth. In particular, Arizona, which has 6% American Indian and Alaska Native eligible voters. Iowa, Nevada, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. All
Thank
those
you
states
so much
that
for
we're
joining
just
us.
holding our breath to see
Jordan,
what the
back to
outcome
you.
is right now. The polling difference is well within the American Indian and Alaska Native percentage right now.
Thank you so much. And now we have Holly Cook-Macaro, who is a consultant with the Spirit Rock Consulting. Holly, earlier this year, we talked about the untold story of the presidential election, which was Natives and campaigns, working in campaigns. Can you tell us a little bit about how, I guess, that changed over the past decades?
Hi, Jordan, and everyone at Indian Country today and out in Indian Country. This is such an exciting night as we all anxiously await the election results. Thank you for having me. What Mark Trahant and all of you guys have put together is so exciting, and the work that you all do in gathering the information about Indian Country and the candidates is something that we just don't get to see in Indian Country. So I wanted to give you all a shout out for the tremendous work that you do. And I miss being in the studio with you, because the vibe that you all put out in 2018, which I think was the inaugural year for the election night coverage, is something I've never experienced before. Yes, absolutely. This is a new day for Natives in politics. And in a way, it's another new day. I think we can look back to the 90s. You know, for a long time, we were afterthoughts to the national political parties. We were a solid Democratic vote in a few states, but didn't get much attention otherwise in terms of building the infrastructure, the political infrastructure for tribes and for Natives in Indian Country. In the 90s, Indian gaming brought tribes to the table in the campaign finance arena. That was really a new space for tribal governments. That place in the political money game has certainly been solidified. And the political expertise of tribes has been showcased with successful strategic investments in individual races, in super PACs, and in very targeted independent expenditures across the country. This year in 2020, and as you mentioned, you and I talked about that probably just about a year ago, I think, initially. And We 20 years ago in 1999, 2000, I was the Director of Native American Affairs for the Democratic National Committee. And as I look back over how things are so different right now from back then in 2000, our representation in the 2020 campaigns across the board, and from the start, the campaigns didn't start thinking of us and about staffing up on the tribal piece in June. They thought about it from the beginning, and we saw multiple presidential campaigns bring on Native people to talk about Native policy, to guide the outreach, to talk about the things that are priorities for Indian country, and to make sure that these candidates, no matter who came out of the primaries, that we were well positioned across the board. And what we saw in the 2020 campaigns in terms of the Native people that we have as advisors, as field staff and policy experts is really unprecedented.
Okay. No, and thank you. I mean, this is really, definitely a new time for, Natives in politics and in campaigns. Thank you so much, Holly. Thanks for joining us the second time around.
No problem. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it's election 2020, and we're following the Native vote with our team here at Indian Country Today. Patty and I have done our part, and now we turn our coverage over to Mark Trahan and Leah Chavez. We'll be right back after this short break.
is a hard-fought right. It hasn't always been valued, and we didn't choose this system of government. But our vote creates power for Indian country. It's one way we care for our elders, defend Indigenous women and girls, protect tribal sovereignty, and fight to improve our mental health. More information about voting is available at nativesvote2020.com.
Welcome back to Indian Country Today's Election Night and Native Vote 20.
Natives Vote.
Good evening. I'm Mark Trahan. Thank you, Patty and Jordan, for your report.
At the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center. We know that the coronavirus has hit Native communities especially hard, and we are happy to share that our elections team has created a socially distant set and that we have no more than 10 people on site.
In the next hour, it's funny, in the next hour we'll be taking you around the country, checking with voters at watch parties, and we'll visit with candidates who could write their name in the history books tonight.
Actually, 111 Native candidates running for offices across the country. We have been tracking those running for the United States Senate, House, state legislatures, Supreme Courts, and even county offices.
Here are the latest numbers. It looks like turnout for this election will exceed all expectations. More than 101 million people have voted before the polls even opened today, and turnout remains heavy, but didn't come close to surpassing the record set in 1876. That year, 81.8% of eligible voters went to the polls. In the presidential race, the Associated Press is projecting a slight lead for Joe Biden, right now 131 Electoral College votes to 108. And it's been showing because of Donald Trump's significant support in rural areas. There are 14 Native candidates for Congress, and there's a good chance that there will be a record number in the next House of Representatives. Familiar faces in Indian country, including Representative Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland, the first two Native women to serve in the Congress, as well as Representative Tom Cole, who's seeking another 2-year term. The Associated Press has called races for 3 of those races. Markwayne Mullin has won his re-election bid. He actually faced off against another Cherokee citizen, Democrat Danielle Lanier. He will continue his 5th term in office. Likely to join them in the House is Native Hawaiian Kai Kahil, the Democratic frontrunner in a race that's heavily blue Hawaii. If all 5 win, as they're expected to now, the next U.S. House will feature more voting Native American members than ever before.
A few weeks ago, I sat down with a familiar face in Indian country. Representative Deb Haaland has had quite a first term of Congress. She was sworn into office during a government shutdown, gavelled from the Speaker's chair, voted in a presidential impeachment, and has been working through a global pandemic. Representative Haaland reflects on her first term in Congress. Near the banks of the Rio Grande River is Albuquerque, New Mexico, the ancestral homelands of the Tiwa-speaking people. This place is the district Representative Deb Haaland serves. Haaland, who was elected in 2018 as part of a historic class of freshmen, says her first term has been nothing short of memorable.
I'm proud to feel like the younger Native kids or folks calling me Auntie. They call me Auntie Deb, which is so kind, and it's a very endearing term because we all know how we feel about our aunties in Indian country.
She frequently adds that she didn't go to Congress alone. With Representative Sharice Davids of the Ho-Chunk Nation, the duo have broken glass ceilings together by being the first 2 Native women elected to Congress.
2018, when Sharice and I both won on the same night, that was exciting. One thing that folks may not realize, but if you watch the video clips, you'll kind of see, it was very ironic that her and I both had the exact same dress on election night.
Haaland says Davids is like a sister to her and has also appreciated working with other Native Congress members, including the Native representatives from Oklahoma, Tom Cole of the Chickasaw Nation and Markwayne Mullin of the Cherokee Nation.
A lot of times in my life, I've just been the only Native in the room. And so glad that my first term in Congress, she is there with me. And it was absolutely meant to be, because now we have 2 Native women, 2 Native men, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats.
Together, the 4 Native Congress members co-sponsored the Not Invisible Act, recently signed into law by President Trump in October.
The 4 of us have formed a strong bond. We know that we can push Indian issues.
The act develops a commission to better identify, report, and respond to cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women. This issue runs deep for Haaland.
I cry a lot when I'm in Congress. It's a sad place. Because you do have witness testimony sometime that just, it's sad. And this issue, as you know, didn't just start a few generations ago. It's been happening since the Europeans came to colonize this continent, since the late 1400s. And it's just going to take a lot of pieces of legislation to untangle this issue and help Native women to feel safe.
She says another important part of her service is ensuring that tribes have proper consultation with the federal government. In February, the chairman of the Tohono O'odham Nation testified before the Natural Resources Committee, saying his tribe's sacred sites were destroyed by dynamite, all in an effort to build the border wall.
It's astounding that their idea of tribal consultation is texting the chairman 2 hours before they're ready to plant dynamite in a sacred site and blast it apart. There's so much work to do, and Native American voices are so important in our politics.
And fighting for Native voices is something she says she will continue doing for future generations.
There are young girls right now who don't know what it's like to not have a Native woman in Congress, right? And so we just have to make sure that we're continuing to to always make sure that our voices are there.
In Albuquerque, Aaliyah Chavez, Indian Country Today.
Thank you for that piece, Aaliyah. Now we have Representative Holland joining us. Good evening, Representative Holland.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you, and thanks so much for being here for Indian Country to report the news. And I am, I'm still hopeful about election night. So we're watching the returns.
How does it feel tonight, 2 years after your first entry into this arena?
Well, of course, I'm honored to have been reelected to serve New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. My heart is filled with love like crazy for all the volunteers, the state chairwoman and her entire team at the Democratic Party of New Mexico, who worked tirelessly during a pandemic, to get votes out in a way that we had never done before. So I'm super grateful for all of the volunteers and everyone who sacrificed to make sure that New Mexico elected Joe Biden, reelected me, and we're still waiting on some returns, but I think the voters of New Mexico have absolutely spoken.
What's it like dealing with constituents during a pandemic when you can't get out and talk to them the same way? How does Zoom work for that sort of work?
Yeah, 13 hours a day, 13 hours of Zooms every day. And if you're not on Zoom, you're on phone calls. So it's constant communication with voters, with my constituents, with our, with allies, we're still legislating. We're still working on moving legislation forward. And so that was all taking place during this pandemic. And I guess it will continue. I'll be going back to DC, sometime soon, next week, perhaps. And hopefully, we'll get some things done before we wrap up this this term, this 116th Congress.
From where we stand tonight, it looks like the Native Caucus is going to grow by at least one and maybe more. How will that affect your work?
Look, Mark, we need representation. I think I was pleased to hear or to know that we had so many Native American candidates running across the country, not just for Congress or the Senate, the U.S. Senate, but in House and Senate districts across the country and local offices. That's what we need. We need representation in elected office. We need to be where folks are making decisions. We need to be a voice at the table, regardless of what table it is. But making decisions for our people, for our constituents, for our country, it's absolutely important. And so I am pleased right here. It looks like we'll add another Native American woman to the New Mexico Senate. And so it's, that's what happens. When you start getting people in office, Native folks in office, other Native folks say, oh yeah, let's do, I can do that too. And that's the whole idea. And, I have spent this entire term supporting candidates, supporting, Paulette Jordan and Rudy Soto in Idaho, endorsed both of them. Sharice Davids, it looks like, is doing extremely well. I'm not sure if they've called her race yet or not. I am just pleased, and I hope that we can continue on this, on this path. And I will, that's what I want to do, is leave the ladder down and make sure that more Native folks run for office.
Well, and there's both a short-term gain and long-term, because you mentioned short-term, people thinking, I can do that, I can run for office. But the thing I've noticed with you on the campaign trail and other women is little girls saying, I want to grow up and be a congresswoman.
Well, that's absolutely right. You know, there are kids right now who will never know what it's like to not have Native women in Congress. That's a norm for them now, right? And so that I'm happy about that. We just need to make sure that there's more of us. And, you know, I feel like, you know, my first term in office, yes, I am proud to be the Congresswoman. Many tribal folks, tribal leaders, council members, you know, folks in various Native organizations in my office talking about issues, moving issues forward. And I just, you know, the comment I get most is, thank you. We don't have to start from, you know, ground zero. You know what tribal sovereignty means. You know, I have a foundation of knowledge about the trust, responsibility, and the history in our country of Indian tribes. And so I'm pleased that when tribal leaders come to my office, I pretty much know what they're talking about.
One last question. It seems like the Native community was really engaged in this election. Maybe talk about that for a second.
I'm sorry?
The engagement of Native voters this time around, both in terms of organization and then actually getting out and voting.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I saw Holly Cook Makara's backdrop, and yes, Natives vote. We, you know, several years back, we started a Native American Democratic Caucus. It's part of the Democratic Party of New Mexico here in New Mexico. And they have just continually gotten more active and more active. And so absolutely, I like to see that. And the more of us who are participating, the more of us who are encouraging voters. And it's not just, you know, we're not just out there encouraging just Natives to vote. We want everyone to vote. You know, when I first started, when I worked in 2012, I should say, my first paid job as a campaign staffer, all of the other times I was a volunteer, I was the regional field director for several counties here in New Mexico. They didn't all have Native Americans in those counties. So, I mean, I feel like when you're organizing, you know, you should reach out and you know, hug everybody. So yes, getting folks in other communities to the polls along with our Native folks, that's absolutely important. But we worked hard in Indian country here in New Mexico. And, you know, I haven't had a chance to look at the results. So I want to dig into those and see how we fared. And, but I think that Indian country had a say in this election.
Thank you so much, Representative Holland.
Thank you.
Representative Holland, we want to go very quickly to some breaking news. The Associated Press is reporting that Paulette Jordan has lost her United States Senate race. She was hoping to make history in that race, but unfortunately has lost that race. We're going to go now to a watch party. In a normal election year, campaign parties are a highlight for those running for office. They have big ballrooms, lots of food, cheering supporters. These parties, like much else, look very different this year. We're going to visit a watch party now where folks are joining us from Juneau, Alaska. Hello, Gail and Leroy. Thank you so much for joining us. For the folks tuning in tonight, what have been your reactions to the races so far?
Hello, everyone in Indian country. It's Gail DeBaluz. My husband got a little bit camera shy, so unfortunately he's not with me. We've been watching the election results come in with bated breath. We are really unsure how we can even call it, to tell you the truth. It just seems so close, and there's a lot of similar feelings from 2016 to 2020. And so Alaska is 4 hours behind the East Coast. So we have a ways to go before we can even figure out the results of our state, my husband's home state of Hawaii.
Definitely. There's a number of candidates running in both of those states. For the two of you all, and especially for you going into election night, what issues were most important to you?
Oh, the most important issues for me personally is the economy. I have been pretty concerned about that and how it relates to the stock market. Of course, the response to COVID and the global pandemic and how that impacts us here in Alaska as Alaska Natives. And, you know, we have many rural communities and it is difficult to get there. We don't have an interconnected road system. It's either you're able to go into the villages by the ferry or a commercial fishing boat or small airplanes. So those are huge concerns for me. U.S. and into.
Well, 100 Native candidates hoping.
Closed. We're just beginning to get numbers for several national races, as well as the number of candidates across the middle of the country. Excuse me. Joe Biden with a 209 states have really not come in yet. We still don't know about Florida. We still don't know about Georgia, Pennsylvania. Tonight, one of the things that concerned us was we wouldn't know enough. But then we thought, you know, it's more important to talk about the Native candidates out there. And
a handful of state legislature races, including in Kansas, but we can report that Representative-elect will be the youngest legislator in Kansas when she is the representatives race. He was hoping to be elected there. You mentioned the presidential race has a lot of states that are very, very reported earlier in the show in Wyoming. The numbers are showing that Lynette Grable has Republican Liz Cheney, who is the third highest ranking member in the House's.
Ben Nighthorse Campbell has had a remarkable career in both the House and the
State. In Washington, we had a lot of cross-party dialogue going on. And I think because a lot of people, number of people from both parties asked me, they'd say, Ben, is this going to help Native people or not? And so even though I was the only voice.
Ben Nighthorse Campbell is regarded as one of the most important advocates for Native American Colorado, and he also served Indian country.
When I was elected, of course, I was the only one since been a national constituency. I was elected from Colorado, but obviously you have to try your. This was better for Indians in the long run than trying to encourage them to be dependent on the federal government.
Still, he is heartened to see more Natives running for national office and winning.
And so I always encourage Native Americans to run for office, and I understand that there's about 100 this year running for public office, state and federal office. I think that's terrific. And some are Republican, and obviously some are Democrat. But one thing I tell them all, and I've said it over and over, remember this, Republican and Democrat is not in your DNA. Native person is in your DNA, and that's what you should keep foremost on your agenda to try to help your people.
Campbell retired from the Senate in 2005 after 22 years of political service. Today, he is president of Ben Nighthorse Consultants Incorporated. In Cincinnati, Marionette Pember, Indian Country Today.
Let's go now to Washington State, where Democrat Deborah Mccanoff has been reelected for a second term in the Washington State House. Representative, congratulations and thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Representative Deborah Mccanoff out of the Washington State House of Representatives. I represent the 40th LD, which is just located north in Washington State. Currently, I am the only Native American to serve in the entire Washington State Legislature, and I'm proud to be here.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you here. Even though you ran unopposed tonight, how are you feeling knowing that your office has been clinched for another 2 years?
I'm so very honored to serve in Washington State. We have 29 federally recognized tribes in Washington State. We have 20 who are part of the treaty tribes of Washington State. I am that conduit that brings together tribal, state, federal, and international governments together to better make decisions that reflect all Washingtonians, but really honor the first Washingtonians and the first Americans. So for me, as a Khalikat from Southeast Alaska, calling Washington State home, it's quite an honor.
Very quickly, I'd love to sort of touch upon what you're most looking forward to in your next term. In a very, very short response, can you tell us, what that is?
Part of the work that we're doing in Washington State really is looking to provide progressive revenue for our state so we can be able to address the COVID crisis that we're fighting both in healthcare for our economies and then building a workforce for the next generation. And for me to do this in the capacity that I have thinking, that's going to help Washington State get where they need to be. But we're going to do it our way, and that is our Native American way of always forward thinking of what the next generation is going to need.
Definitely, Representative. Thanks so much again, and congratulations.
Thanks so much. Best of luck to all of our candidates.
In Minnesota, Donna Bergstrom is a Republican, and she was running for the Minnesota State Senate. She joins us now. Donna Bergstrom.
Hello, bonjour. I'm Donna Bergstrom. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I live in Duluth, Minnesota. I'm a member of the Red Lake Nation, Northeast Minnesota, one of 11 federally recognized tribes here in Minnesota.
Great to see you. Tell us what's going on in Minnesota tonight.
Yeah, so Minnesota's really seen a lot of action in this election cycle. We've had a lot of interest in our elections. And one of the things that we just engaged in was Native Vote. And we worked with a lot of the Native community, tribal members, et cetera, to register them to vote. And in our community here in Duluth, I've been making the case that in Minnesota, I would be the first Native American woman to serve in the Minnesota Senate.
And do you have some returns?
We do have some returns coming in, yep, and we're waiting for more of the numbers to come in. We ran a really hard ground game. We were out campaigning since February when I first announced, and it was an open seat, so we're real hopeful that the numbers will roll our way.
One of the things we're seeing in exit polls across the country is a division among people who want to see the economy as the top priority versus those who see pandemic as the top priority. How does that factor in your district?
Well, you know, in Duluth, we're not as populous as some of the bigger cities. So we do have a balance that we would like to see better managed, because we've had a lot of our businesses closed down because of the pandemic. And so people are saying, where's the balance? We know that this pandemic is deadly, but we also know that killing our small businesses and some of our entrepreneurs that we're just starting out isn't helpful at all. So what we're really looking for is a balance in the pandemic and the economy.
Donna Bergstrom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Miigwech.
Aaliyah, one of the most interesting parts of election night is seeing the reactions on social media. Let's check in with Paula Jordan for a social media report. Polly, what are you seeing in the digital universe? And we're missing that report. Oh, there's Polly. What are we seeing out there, Polly?
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
What's in the universe, Polly?
So definitely congratulations all around for Sharice Davids and also Deb Haaland. But also on Instagram, I did see that Gabriela Cazares Kelly was voted for Pima County Recorder in Arizona, and she is the first Native American in Pima County to be elected to a countywide position. So that was super exciting tonight. Indivisible Tohono said, cheers to our friend Gabriella for recorder, the first Native American elected to a Pima County-wide office position. So that was super, super exciting to see. And Gabriella definitely utilized TikTok. She shared several TikToks on her Instagram and also on her TikTok, just encouraging people to get out and vote and also to have their voices heard.
Polly, do you think that social media was an organizing tool this election?
Oh, it definitely was. I saw a lot of organizing happening online to get out the vote. The SCO Vote Den campaign was huge on social media. Native Outdoors and the Rural Utah Voting Project, I believe, were really pushing Native voting, especially using Native influencers and reaching younger voters and encouraging them to vote. So there were a ton of Native influencers on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter who were really encouraging young people and just Native folks in general to go out and vote.
How does the Zoom world change social media?
I think that Zoom has really provided a platform and a way for Native folks from all across the country to come together. So making sure that voices from all across Indian country are heard. I think that it's really allowed a space for there to be connections between different tribes.
Polly Deneclaw, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yep, thank you.
So many interesting takeaways, and we want to remind folks that they can join in to the conversation on social media by using the hashtag NativeVote20 and Native Election Night. We're taking a quick break here in the studio. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Indian Country Today and Election Night. For those of you just joining us, we're coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona, at our studio located at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center.
Prompter. Here are the latest numbers. It looks like the turnout for this election will exceed all expectations. More than 101 million people voted before the polls even opened today, and turnout remained heavy on election day. We can report now in Arizona, we have a Democrat, Gabriella Casares-Kelly, the candidate that Polly referred to earlier. She's a Tohono O'odham woman, and she's running for Pima County Recorder. And we want to remind folks out there that we're not just covering candidates running for United States Congress. We are really covering the candidates up and down the ballot. So we can report now that she's winning her race with more than 247,000 votes compared to her opponent, who has 144,000 votes as well. And this seat has been vacant for the first time since 1992. So she's really hoping to maximize on that and hopefully clinch that seat as Pima County Reporter. Now we're going to go ahead and move over to California, where we have Assembly Member James Ramos. Assembly Member, great to see you. How are you doing tonight? James Ramos is an Assembly member in California, serving as the first Native person ever elected to the state legislature. He joins us tonight in hopes of seeking a second term. Assembly member, great to see you. You're hoping to be elected to your second term. Tell us about your campaign experience, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic.
So the campaign experience this round is very much different. We've relied more on mail, radio, and digital. The traditional of how we would have meet and greets at different people's homes is something that's outside of the spectrum of what we've been able to do. So we've served on tribal council as the chairman of the people of Santos Benuel, on the community college board and the county board of supervisors here in San Bernardino County. And this election is an election that really took a lot of energy to make sure that we continue to move forward. And we're waiting for the first update on our results of our election here at this moment.
You've been a big advocate of homelessness and mental health. Looking back on your first term, what are you most proud of?
I think, you know, being able to create for the first time in the history of the state of California an Office of Suicide Prevention is something that we look back on to make sure that we continue to move forward. That's something that we're very proud to be able to have done, because when we talk about suicide prevention, the Office of Suicide Prevention in the state of California, it does include the California Indian people and the Indian people in general from the state of California that's included in that area and collecting data so we get resources out to Indian country that drastically needs it.
I think a lot of people, especially in California, given that you're one of the sole legislators in California, they look to you for Native issues. What does that feel like to you? And can you maybe describe, you know, what types of people come to you and with what problems?
So a lot of times tribal governments do come to us with issues that they're dealing with the local municipalities, counties, and even the state. Another bill that we move forward on that we're very proud of for Indian country is AB 3099 that helps to identify missing and murdered Native American women here in the state of California, and paves the way for the Attorney General and tribal governments to work together to make sure they truly understand the investigative authority to go out and solve these cases. So we were able to bring advocacy to that, and we're continuing to bring advocacy to it. Also, another bill, AB 275, that we got signed by the governor, deals with cultural preservation. There was an audit that was done that was an audit on the UC system here in the state of California. And they found that the UC system still has over 500,000 Native American remains that still need to be repatriated back to the Indian people. So my bill, AB 275, starts to pave the way for those repatriations to start to take place. And that's another bill that, by being a California Indian legislature, knowing the need that's in Indian country, we're able to introduce those bills because we know it's important to Indian country and to Indian people.
Assembly member, thank you so much for doing this important work, and thank you for joining us. We'll continue watching your race tonight.
Well, thank you. And another bill that we had, I just want to close with, is AB 2314 that calls on the Secretary of State and the tribal communities to start to put together a task force to make sure that our Native people are out there being able to vote without any hindrance of reservations that are far away from cities and different areas in the county, that we make sure that our Native American voice counts and our Native American voice is there on voting on these important issues here in the state of California. And I look forward to a re-election to the State Assembly.
Member, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The idea of voting is certainly one that's going to come up a lot. Let's check in with another candidate, Shane Morgeau, who currently serves in the House of Representatives in Montana. He's running for a new position to be elected as Montana State Auditor. Representative Morgeau, hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. Tell us what you're seeing in Montana tonight.
Can you guys hear me all right?
I can hear you now, yes.
All right.
What's it look like in Montana tonight?
Well, you know, it's still so early in Montana, and you know, they kind of just keep bouncing back and forth. A lot of the rural counties are reporting. Missoula County is in part of Yellowstone, and so the numbers keep just kind of bouncing back and forth. I think I just refreshed the numbers, and in Montana's at 26% of the precincts, 6.9% are reporting, and around 26% of the vote is in. So there's still a lot of time left to go here. So we'll see how, and actually some of the bigger counties, Gallatin County hasn't reported any numbers so far. So we'll see what happens. I have a Libertarian candidate in my race too, and they tend to absorb some of the numbers from the Republicans. So we'll see what happens. You know, I worked my butt off. I poured my heart and soul into this race to try and give people more representation throughout Montana, including Indian country, be the first Native state auditor in Montana. And so I want this office to represent everyone in the state.
Well, in fact, it's interesting because there are not that many constitutional offices, and you're one of the few on the ballot this time around.
Yep.
How did the Native communities seem to be engaged this time around?
You know, my understanding is, you know, the numbers were, and some of the reservations were actually exceeding numbers from the prior election. And there were some that were still lower as of yesterday, but we're closing in on the number from the last election. And my understanding is that most of them are probably exceeded their prior count number from the prior election. So, you know, there were people standing in line. There might be still in Montana. At 8:15 or 8:20, there was still an hour wait. And so there's still a chance that people might be standing in line right now, but people came out today still to vote, even though most of the counties chose to do mail ballots in Montana. In Indian country, many of those communities go to the polls and vote on election day. So we'll see it's just so many new voters in Montana. And that's a good thing. You know, it makes me feel good to see that people are being engaged and making these decisions for the state. But there's just so many new voters that it's just so hard to say, like, you know, how are they voting? You know, all these new voters that have registered and voted in Montana. So, you know, I think we're in for a long night, though.
We are indeed. Thank you, Representative Morgeau.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so great to hear from so many voices tonight, Aaliyah.
Definitely. 2 years ago, Paulette Jordan ran for governor of Idaho. She came up short, and she was also hoping to be elected to the United States Senate. Regardless of the outcome, she's definitely made a splash in the political world. Correspondent Lori Edmo has more.
Paulette Jordan says it will mean everything to have a Native woman in the United States Senate.
My name is Paulette Jordan. I am from the state of Idaho. I'm a citizen of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. Born and raised out in the countryside of North Idaho. I serve now as representative of the people in my area. I ran in 2018 as a gubernatorial candidate. And now I'm running as a U.S. Senator for the state. I know that my message is strong, and that is a message that I will stand on, and of course people will continue to invest in, and I think that's very exciting. We have a lot to offer in our message. We're offering integrity, we're offering accountability, fiscal conservatism, and we're always going to be true to the people's voice, which has always been part of my leadership style, my approach, which is going directly to our citizens and going directly to our neighbors and friends, and especially those who feel that they are part of that larger voice who has become voiceless over these last many decades.
Jordan draws on her experience as a tribal leader and tells Idaho voters about the importance of tribal sovereignty.
We do what we do best. We, as a tribal people, we've always held up our contract with Mother Earth, and we've always been the greatest stewards, I would say, of the environment. You know, for thousands of years, we've upheld not only our position as ambassadors of peace, but we've always been very good at upholding our relationship with nature. And I think with our tribe, specifically in North Idaho, we had challenges in the past, the most recent challenges with our Superfund lake cleanup. And it's, water, as you know, is always one of the most precious resources, which is, by all means, to me, the most precious resource that we have on this planet. And we want to protect water at all costs. However, I always tell our youth that the best way to engage is to ask questions and to seek mentorship in your elders who have some of the greatest knowledge that they can provide in this world. That is, our education system is reaching out to our elders because they are the direct link to our ancestry. And so when they're able to apply those teachings and that linear knowledge that no one else can get or buy from any book, that is really the greatest aspect of connecting us to even our future, because they are the future, but yet they have this holistic responsibility to adhere to that message and carry that forward, because I was always taught that through our ancestry, a lot of our people, we are defined as the greatest stewards of this planet for the environment and for nature and for humanity. We are here to bring peace, so we are the ultimate peacekeepers.
In Ross Fork Creek, Idaho, I am Lorianne Edmo for Indian Country Today.
Earlier this year, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard decided she wasn't running for re-election, which meant there was an open seat representing Hawaii in the House. State Senator Kaili'i Kahele is the favorite to win that congressional race. National correspondent Dalton Walker brings us more on Kahele, who could be just the second Native Hawaiian to serve in Congress since statehood.
Now I have a...
We don't have a stand, do we?
Kai Kahele started his path to a potential seat in Congress nearly 2 years ago. Now, the finish line is neared along with a seat in the U.S. House.
First thing is, I want people to know that I am grounded in my kupuna. That's a Hawaiian word for ancestors. That I am proud to, represent all of Hawaii. But as a Native Hawaiian, I'm extremely proud to represent the Native Hawaiian community and Indigenous peoples in this country.
With a win, Kahele would join the late Senator Daniel Akaka as Native Hawaiians in Congress since Hawaii became a state in 1959.
Personal friend, mentor, someone I've looked up to my entire life, and it's the late Senator Daniel Kahikina Akaka, who is the only Native Hawaiian since statehood elected to represent the state of Hawaii.
Kahele has election history on his side. His district has voted Democrat since it was created in 1971. If he's elected, Kahele says he's looking forward to working with the Native American caucus.
I think adding to our Native Indigenous members of Congress, especially in the House, is very, very important because we have unique issues and we have a unique history with the United States of America that requires a strong voice in the United States Congress.
In Phoenix, Dalton Walker, Indian Country Today.
We knew it was going to be a challenge to pack so much into a 2-hour block, and indeed the night is showing that it is very difficult. The swing states still have not reported in, so it's still pretty clear that we don't know who the next president of the United States will be. But there are a lot of questions about what's next. Policy and election expert Holly Cook-Macaro joins us for an update on what we can expect now. Holly, welcome back.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me again.
Oh, delighted. I would hoped at this point in the night to be talking about candidate school and all the things they might be doing, but there's a lot we don't know.
There is definitely a lot that we don't know. I think the biggest breaking news that we've had is our 4 Native American members of Congress were reelected, and which is terrific news. I think both you and I, as longtime politicos, have watched them in action for the past 2 years in their first terms, and the impact that their voices have in the Congress is tremendous. So it is, no matter how anything else goes this evening, the fact that our four our current Native members of Congress that are seated, I want to wish them all a huge congratulations.
And you know, I think one of the most important parts of that political story is when people run in places like Wyoming and Utah and all across the country, it shows really the Native experience as ordinary, that we're professionals, that we're doing things, that we don't have to be in a confrontational role.
Yes, that the candidates in these states that maybe are not the ones that America thinks of when they think of Native American candidates. I think even our party committees, when they say, well, we have to work to get out the vote, they often look to the Southwest. They forget about districts like Colin Peterson's district in northern Minnesota, the home of my tribe, but also 3 other large land-based tribes, the White Earth Nation, the Red Lake Nation, the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Those are large land-based tribes that have a huge impact on a very important House race. So these, you're right, when we look to the different corners and we look to all the places that our Native candidates have come from this cycle, it kind of builds on what I was talking about earlier about how the growth in Indian country from being an afterthought, from being a solid Democratic vote that no one had to work very hard for, that to now that we are not only playing as advisors, top level policy advisors, we are in the field. We had Pauwi Rivera that he held a number of different very significant campaign slots this cycle. And I really thought Pauwi was an example of, there's nothing we can't do as Native people in the political universe anymore. We can run, we can be the policy of the Native person in the primary. We can be a state director. We can be the desk at the national committee. And so as we're moving forward, we've got the candidates in all the corners. We're really, I think, running on all cylinders this cycle. It's been tremendous to see.
Thank you so much for joining us, Holly.
Thank you, Mark.
We have some updates. In Minnesota, Heather Keeler, Yankton Sioux, and Eastern Shoshone won a state House seat. She's a Democrat in Minnesota. Summer Wesley, Choctaw, lost a state House seat. In Wyoming, Andy Clifford, Northern Arapaho, won state House seat. Now let's go to Idaho. Oh, 10, I guess that's it for Indian Country today. We went through 2 hours really fast. Stay tuned to our website for more information, and we'll update throughout the week.